Most people won't get crushed by the storm. They'll get crushed by the rules, the panic, and the desperate people around them when SHTF. A man in Colorado got fined for collecting rainwater in 2 barrels in his own backyard. A couple in Florida was told to tear out a vegetable garden they'd grown for 17 years or keep paying penalties. A family in California got cited because the gasoline in their garage was 3 gallons over the legal limit. 3 gallons. That's not rumor. That's not internet tinfoil. That's paperwork, citations, and court records. The ugly truth is this. Right now, in your own house, you could already be in violation of a law you've never even heard of. And here's where it gets worse. These laws didn't roll in with sirens and headlines. They slipped in through omnibus bills nobody read, fire codes nobody checked, emergency orders nobody bothered to roll back. Quiet, boring, bureaucratic. That's how they get you. And the target isn't the cartel. It isn't the mob. It isn't some corporate giant. It's the ordinary guy trying to keep water on hand, food in storage, fuel for backup power, and a roof over his family when the grid goes down. Listen to me. In more places than most Americans realize, self-reliance is being treated like suspicious behavior. There are now 8 major categories of laws across the U.S. that either restrict, regulate, or flat-out punish basic preparedness, water, food, fuel, comms, off-grid living, growing your own food, firearm storage, even selling a spare generator to a neighbor during a declared emergency. And in some states, these rules stack up so hard that just knowing where the traps are becomes a survival advantage. That's not drama, that's OPSEC. The guy who knows the rules gets to move quietly. The guy who doesn't gets exposed, fined, flagged, maybe worse. So let's start with something so absurd it sounds fake. Rain, water falling out of the sky. Free, natural, and in some places, controlled like it belongs to somebody else. In Colorado, the law limits residential rainwater collection to 110 gallons. That's 2 5-gallon barrels. That's it. A family of 4 burns through water faster than most people think. Drinking, cooking, basic sanitation, you're looking at around 12 gallons a day for bare minimum use. So that legal cap doesn't buy you security. It buys you a short delay. After that, you're either dependent again or you're crossing a line the state drew for you. In Utah, you can collect up to 2,500 gallons, but only if you register with the state. Think about that. You have to tell the government how much rain you're catching. In Oregon, rooftop collection is generally legal, but once that water hits the ground and starts moving, now it's a different game. Then it may be considered state-controlled water, and taking it without permission can put you in violation. Most people never see this coming. They buy a rain barrel at a hardware store, set it up in the backyard, feel smart, feel prepared, and then find out too late that the law sees that barrel differently. Forget the garbage you saw on TV. In a real grid-down event, water is life, and the state already has a say in how much of it you're allowed to catch in some areas. There are workarounds, but you need to stay cold and deliberate. In restrictive states, roof-only systems matter. In Utah, registration is annoying but free, so do it if you're there. In some states, agricultural exemptions can open things up fast. A qualifying property with agricultural use can get much looser rules, and sometimes that threshold is lower than people think. A few acres, a few beehives, and suddenly the playing field changes. Here's what matters. These laws were originally built around old Western water rights systems, not around a family trying to survive a grid-down week. But intent doesn't protect you. Enforcement is what matters. And that disconnect between why the law was written and how it hits you now is a pattern you're going to see again and again, because the next trap isn't outside in the rain. It's in your basement, sitting on your shelves, waiting to be called something ugly the second the emergency declaration hits. Here's what the tactical guys won't tell you. The food you stock for survival can be rebranded as hoarding the second the situation turns ugly. You spend months, maybe years, building up canned goods, rice, beans, freeze-dried meals, oats, salt, oil, the boring stuff that actually keeps you alive when shelves go bare. You rotate it, you label it, you stash it right. Then a hurricane hits, a riot kicks off, a state of emergency gets declared, and now the same supply that made you smart yesterday can make you look criminal today. That's the game. Most anti-hoarding laws were supposed to go after retailers and opportunists who buy up essentials and flip them at obscene prices. Fine. In theory, that makes sense. But the language in a lot of these statutes is sloppy, broad, and dangerous. Terms like excessive quantities and unreasonable accumulation get tossed around with no hard line, no clean number, no bright marker. That means interpretation. And interpretation means whoever's wearing the badge, whoever's sitting at the desk, and whoever's looking for an example to make out of somebody. In at least a dozen states, those laws can reach right into your house. That's the part people miss. There's no universal federal definition that cleanly separates preparedness from hoarding. One judge sees a 6-month food supply and calls it responsible. Another sees the exact same shelves and calls it excessive. Same food, same house, different outcome. Screw this up, and you won't just lose supplies. You could end up explaining yourself when you should be focused on staying alive. So move smart. First in, first out. That's not just good storage discipline. That's your legal shield. You want records that show slow, steady accumulation over time, not panic buying in the final hours before landfall. Keep receipts. Timestamp your shelves once in a while. Build a paper trail that says this stockpile was built methodically, not frantically. Quiet prep is smart prep. Gray Man rules apply here too. Don't brag. Don't post. Don't show your neighbor your pantry wall and then act shocked when panic season starts and your name gets mentioned. And keep your quantities defensible. Notice I didn't say small. I said defensible. If you can explain it as a household supply for a certain number of people over a certain number of months with rotation records, you've got a better footing. Not perfect. Better. Some people go another route and use separate storage under a business structure. A commercial unit tied to an LLC can place supplies in a different legal frame than a basement packed wall-to-wall. Is that a magic shield? No, nothing is. But it's harder to paint it as frantic residential hoarding when there's organization, records, and separation. Now let's talk about the thing in your garage that can burn your house down and get you jammed up with code enforcement at the same time. Fuel. Gasoline is where a lot of preppers get lazy, and lazy gets punished. The basic baseline in much of the country is 25 gallons of gasoline in approved containers. That sounds decent until you run the math. A portable generator can chew through 1 to 2 gallons an hour under load. So your legal fuel reserve might buy you somewhere between roughly half a day and maybe a day of continuous power if you're careful. In a winter storm, a week-long outage, or true grid-down chaos, that's not resilience. That's a countdown clock, and some places are worse. In parts of California, limits on portable gasoline have gone as low as 5 gallons. 5. That's not a preparedness plan. That's enough runtime to tease you with false confidence before the lights die again. The smarter route is fuel diversification. Diesel gets treated differently in many places and can often be stored in larger quantities with approved systems. It's less volatile and stores longer. Propane opens another lane. Properly installed tanks are common, legal, and far more useful than people think for heating, cooking, and backup systems. Solar and battery fill in the gaps without adding another flammable problem. The lesson is simple. Never let one fuel source become your only lifeline. A single point of failure gets you killed in WROL, and a single point of legal exposure gets you flagged long before that. But there's another trap sitting in a lot of bug-out bags right now, and most people don't realize the crime starts the second they push one button. Listen to me. That little radio in your go bag is not just a tool. In the wrong moment, it's evidence. A lot of people in this niche bought a Baofeng, tossed it in a drawer, watched 2 YouTube videos, and now they think they're squared away for grid-down comms. That's fantasy. The second you transmit on amateur frequencies without the right FCC license, you've stepped into federal territory. Not theory, not probably, federal. And the fines can hit 6 figures per violation. That is not the kind of attention you want when the country is already sliding into chaos. Now here's the nuance that matters. Listening is legal. Monitoring is legal. Owning the radio is legal. The problem starts when you key the mic. That means a radio can sit in your cache, your truck, or your bug-out bag for months without issue. But the moment you decide to test it, talk on it, or use it because you think nobody's listening, you may have just created a very expensive mistake. And here's the tactical truth. A lot of guys planning for SHTF build their entire comms plan around gear they are not legally cleared to use. That's sloppy. Fix it now, not later. The entry-level technician license is not some giant obstacle. It's a basic test, 35 questions, about $35. No Morse code, no engineering degree. For that, you get legal access to the VHF and UHF bands that cover most local and regional emergency communication needs. That's cheap insurance. Dirt cheap. In this space, people will spend thousands on night vision, optics, tactical nylon, and backup batteries, then gamble their whole comms setup over the cost of lunch and a few hours of study. That's ego, not preparedness. Yes, there are emergency exceptions in federal rules for immediate danger to life. But hear me clearly, immediate danger is narrow, and it gets judged after the fact, after the smoke clears, after someone reviews what you did. Building your plan around that loophole is like betting your family's survival on a coin toss. Real plans don't depend on mercy. Real plans depend on legality, redundancy, and discipline. There are alternatives. FRS radios require no license and work fine for short-range comms. GMRS stretches range better and only needs a simple license, no exam. CB is still license-free. Mesh networking tools sit in a different lane entirely. The point is not to worship one device. The point is to build layered communication so one broken rule or one dead battery doesn't collapse the whole system. Now let's move from radios to where you actually sleep, because this next one is brutal. Your home is not your castle if the county says it isn't. A lot of people dream about buying land, putting up a cabin, running solar, pulling from a well, heating with wood, using a composting toilet, and disappearing from the grid. Sounds solid. Sounds smart. Sounds like freedom. But in many parts of America, that setup can get condemned, not because it's unsafe, but because it's not approved. That's the ugly truth. Many jurisdictions tie legal habitability to utility hookups and code compliance, grid power, approved septic, approved water, sometimes minimum square footage, sometimes construction specs that make low-profile, practical living nearly impossible. So you can build something that works perfectly in the real world and still have the county label it uninhabitable on paper. That means no legal occupancy. In plain English, they can treat you like you're camping on your own land. Florida has hammered people over this. California is even worse in many places. And county lines matter more than state slogans. One county leaves you alone. The next one buries you in inspections, notices, and threats. That's why smart people stop obsessing over the state map and start studying county enforcement. The law on paper is one thing. The law in practice is another. There are ways to move smarter. Tiny homes on wheels can dodge some building code traps because they're treated more like vehicles than structures. Agricultural exemptions can change the rules if your land qualifies. Some people keep a minimal grid tie they barely use, just enough to satisfy the county while they actually live off solar. It's ugly, but it works. Forget the romance. Off-grid living in America is not just a build problem. It's a paperwork war. And if you think that's insane, wait until you hear what some places will do over a few tomato plants in your own front yard. Forget the garbage you saw on TV about homesteading being some wholesome little hobby. In the real world, your front yard garden can become a code violation, and the people turning you in usually aren't faceless bureaucrats first. It's neighbors, busybodies, HOA rats, panicked locals who smile at you when times are good and start counting your resources when things get tight. That's why Gray Man matters. Don't advertise capability. Don't make your house look like the one place on the block with food, water, power, and options. A couple in Florida fought for years over vegetables in their front yard. 17 years growing food, then suddenly it became a problem. Fines stacked up day after day. Florida eventually passed protection for residential vegetable gardens, but the only reason that protection exists is because the crackdown came first. Outside places with those protections, zoning rules and HOA garbage can still hit you hard. Raised beds, visible crops, certain plant types, even how ornamental your yard looks. Some towns and associations regulate all of it. That means the thing keeping your family fed in a shortage can also become the thing that flags you to everyone around you. The smart move is simple. Backyard over front yard whenever possible. Lower visibility. Less attention. Less heat. If your state has right to garden protections, know them cold. Print them. Save them. And if you're in an HOA, understand this now. Not after you've already built out beds and invested money. In a clean suburban neighborhood during normal times, code enforcement is annoying. In a shaky economy with social tension, it becomes one more pressure point used against anyone who looks too prepared. Now let's get into a subject that gets people emotional fast. So strip the emotion out and focus on the reality. Firearm storage laws are changing, and they are changing in ways that matter for actual home defense. In a growing number of states, guns have to be locked up, trigger-locked, stored in approved containers, or some combination of all three. In places like California, Massachusetts, and New York, failure to comply can turn criminal, not just civil, especially if a minor gets access and someone gets hurt. Here's the prepper problem. A home defense gun does you no good if it takes forever to access when looters kick the door or a panicked mob decides your house looks worth testing. 30 seconds sounds short in a calm room. In a violent entry, 30 seconds is forever. So you're balancing two things that don't naturally play nice: rapid access and legal compliance. The answer is not pretending the law doesn't exist. The answer is better gear, biometric safes, RFID access, fast entry lockboxes placed where they make sense. Not perfect, but far better than leaving a weapon unsecured and praying you never get judged for it later. Know your state's current law, not what it was last year, because this area shifts fast, faster than most people realize. And now we get to one of the nastiest traps of all: helping people. Selling a spare generator, fuel can, battery bank, or case of water to a neighbor during a declared emergency can get twisted into price gouging depending on where you live. That's right. You stored it, maintained it, kept it ready, and now if somebody offers to pay you for it during disaster conditions, the state may decide the price was too high after the fact, not before, after. In some places, these laws don't just hit businesses. They can hit private person-to-person sales too. Read that again and let it sink in. In a real SHTF moment, your biggest threat may not be the storm outside. It may be the desperate human being in front of you and the legal trap waiting behind him. That's why smart operators think in terms of prearranged agreements, mutual aid circles, and gift economies long before the emergency gets declared. Paper it early or give it free. Once the declaration hits, the rules change and the window narrows. This is the pattern. Water, food, fuel, comms, shelter, gardens, firearms, even neighbor-to-neighbor support. The system keeps drawing tighter circles around self-reliance. And next, we get to the states where those circles stack worst of all, and the loopholes that still give you room to move if you're smart enough to use them. The ugly truth is your zip code can matter more than your skill set. You can do everything right, store smart, stay quiet, bug in, keep your mouth shut, maintain OPSEC, still get boxed in by the state, the county, or some local code clown with too much authority and too little common sense. We scored all 50 states across the 8 pressure points we just covered, and 5 stand out as the most hostile terrain for anyone trying to stay self-reliant without getting jammed up. Massachusetts is ugly because the firearm rules are brutal, off-grid compliance is tight, and the bureaucracy loves process. Florida surprises people, but it shouldn't. It talks freedom, but certain counties come down hard on off-grid living, emergency restrictions, and broad price gouging enforcement. Colorado is a rainwater trap with extra baggage stacked on top. New York is a regulatory minefield, especially in the Metro Belt. And California sits at the top like the final boss of anti-preparedness, law fuel limits, storage laws, off-grid restrictions, emergency enforcement, all of it layered deep. But listen carefully. Big states lie. They look uniform on a map, but they're not. Urban cores tend to be hostile, rural edges tend to be looser. A prepper in a rural county with agricultural standing can have more room to operate than somebody in a polished suburb inside a supposedly better state. That's why amateurs ask, what's the best state? Pros ask, what county? What zoning? What enforcement pattern? Who's the building inspector? What does the sheriff care about? That's the real game. And now, here's where the seams in the system start to show. Agricultural exemption is one of the biggest legal force multipliers you can get. In a lot of states, once property is classified as agricultural, rules soften, water rules can loosen, storage limits can change, zoning gets more forgiving. Building code pressure drops in certain areas, and the threshold is often lower than people think. A few acres, documented activity, beekeeping, orchard work, small production that can shift your category. The key word is documented, not talked about, not intended, documented. Then there's the LLC route. Commercial storage often lives under a different rule set than personal residential storage. Fuel, equipment, supplies, different tier, different framing, different level of scrutiny. No, it's not magic. It has to be legit. Records, taxes, purpose. But legal separation between you and your cash gives you breathing room. And breathing room is survival. Tiny homes on wheels are another seam. In many jurisdictions, they aren't treated like fixed structures, which means fewer building code headaches, fewer utility demands, fewer occupancy traps. You still have parking rules, stay limits, sanitation issues, but compared to fighting for a certificate of occupancy on an off-grid cabin, it can be a much cleaner lane. And then there's the move most people ignore until it's too late: interstate positioning. Colorado chokes rain capture. Wyoming doesn't. California squeezes fuel hard in some areas. Nevada can be lighter. New York Metro is a fortress of regulation. A few hours away, the terrain changes. If you haven't bought land yet, understand this right now. The right county in the right state is worth more than a truck full of gear bought for the wrong location. One final reality check. Laws move. Courts reinterpret. Emergency powers expand. What's legal today can become a problem tomorrow, especially after a disaster, during civil unrest, or when the grid stays down long enough for desperate people to start talking. That's why this isn't just about knowing the law. It's about staying ahead of it, staying gray, and staying uninteresting. Because in a real collapse, the loud guy with the big mouth gets visited first by neighbors, looters, or the state. The quiet guy with records, layers, and a low profile keeps operating. Awareness is a survival tool. Use it before the window closes.